The rain was merciless that evening, pounding against the city like an endless drum. People hurried past, shielding themselves beneath umbrellas, desperate to stay dry. Yet, in the middle of that storm, a young girl sat on the sidewalk, barefoot, drenched, and begging silently for help. No one noticed her. No one cared. But just when it seemed she had been forgotten by the world, a convoy of black luxury cars pulled up across the street. From one of them stepped a man whose name carried weight across the city, a billionaire, untouchable and powerful. No one could have predicted what would happen next. His single, unexpected act would leave an entire crowd stunned, spark debates across the nation, and prove that compassion still had the power to shock the world. The city was alive with chaos, but the rain drowned out most of its usual noises. Thick sheets of water poured from the heavens, bouncing off the cracked sidewalks and creating tiny rivers that snaked their way along the street's edge. The air smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust fumes, as cars sped by, splashing pedestrians who clung tightly to their umbrellas. Everyone was in a hurry, scurrying figures with lowered heads, desperate to avoid both the storm and the sight of misfortune. On the corner of the bustling avenue, beneath the flickering glow of a faulty street lamp, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 11. Her thin frame shook violently in the cold. She had no shoes, only a pair of oversized slippers, worn down to nothing. Her small dress clung to her skin, plastered by the rain. In her trembling hands, she held a rusty tin can, its faded paint peeling away, leaving just enough metal exposed to make the sound of coins painfully sharp whenever one fell inside. But no coins were falling today. The girl's eyes were hollow but observant. She wasn't screaming for attention like the city's vendors or preachers. She wasn't tugging at coats or chasing pedestrians. She simply sat there, silent, drenched, and hopeful that someone, anyone, would notice. The rain stung her face as she tilted her head toward the stream of strangers rushing by. She whispered in a voice too weak to be heard, "Please, just bread, please." But no one stopped. Men in tailored suits walked by, raising their trousers so they wouldn't get wet. Women in designer coats clutched their handbags closer, avoiding her gaze entirely. Even a street hawker selling roasted corn looked down at her briefly, sighed, and continued yelling his prices, pretending she wasn't there. The storm worsened. Water pooled around her, soaking through the cardboard she sat on until it disintegrated into mush. Her knees were scraped, her fingers purple with cold, but still she didn't move. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharper than the chill. She thought of her mother, sick and coughing back in the single-room shack they called home. If she went back empty-handed, there would be no food, no medicine, just another night of pain and empty promises. The girl wrapped her frail arms around herself, rocking gently, as though the motion might create some illusion of warmth. Her eyes darted around hopefully whenever a figure approached, but each time her heart sank when they passed without a word, without a glance. She wasn't just invisible, she was deliberately unseen. As the rain hammered down harder, thunder rolling in the distance, she closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a prayer. Somewhere, deep inside, she clung to the belief that maybe, just maybe, God or fate or luck would send her a miracle that day. And then, headlights appeared. A line of sleek black cars rolled slowly down the street, their polished surfaces glistening in the rain. Unlike the other vehicles, they didn't speed past. They slowed, and stopped. Something was about to happen. The street seemed to pause when the convoy stopped. Sleek black SUVs with tinted windows gleamed under the relentless downpour, their engines humming like restrained beasts. Curious onlookers slowed their pace, stealing glances at the unusual sight. In this part of the city, luxury vehicles rarely lingered, they sped through, untouched by the grit of everyday struggle. But this convoy waited. The rear door of the central car opened smoothly, and a tall figure emerged. He was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit that clung perfectly to his frame, with polished Italian shoes that should never have touched muddy ground. Two security men immediately rushed forward with umbrellas, forming a shield against the rain. Cameras from nearby bystanders rose into the air, some people already recording, whispering his name. It was him. The billionaire. The man whose face appeared on business magazines, whose fortune was a subject of envy and speculation. A man who had been described as untouchable, living in a world far removed from ordinary suffering. In the middle of the storm, his presence commanded attention like a lighthouse piercing through fog. He glanced toward the hotel across the street, its golden lights beckoning him into warmth and luxury. Inside, a banquet awaited, a meeting with foreign investors that could seal yet another multi-million-dollar deal. Every second mattered. His assistants hovered near the entrance, waving for him to hurry. But he didn't move toward them. His gaze was fixed elsewhere. Across the puddled street, beneath the flickering lamp, he had noticed her, the little girl. Small, drenched, shivering. Her tiny can, almost empty, sat hopelessly between her feet. For reasons even he couldn't explain at that moment, his steps faltered. Something tugged inside him. The bodyguards noticed his pause and quickly scanned the area, assuming a security threat. One leaned in and whispered, "Sir, we need to move. The rain is worsening." But the billionaire didn't answer. His jaw tightened. For years, he had been known as a man of numbers, not sentiment, deals, not distractions. Yet, the sight of that girl was impossible to dismiss. She wasn't shouting, wasn't demanding. She simply sat there, enduring. And that quiet endurance spoke louder than anything else. He took a slow step forward. Then another. His polished shoes splashed into the puddles, soaking with rain. Gasps echoed from those watching. People whispered, "Is he going to her?" The security detail rushed to flank him, clearly unsettled by his change of direction. Assistants called after him, panicked, "Sir, your meeting." But he ignored them, eyes never leaving the child. The girl noticed him too. Her trembling lips parted in confusion. She had seen thousands of shoes pass her by, none ever slowing, none ever stopping. But these shoes, expensive, foreign, gleaming even under the rain, were walking directly toward her. And then it happened, the billionaire, worth billions, walked out of the comfort of his convoy and into the storm, straight toward a child everyone else had chosen to overlook. The crowd held its breath. Something extraordinary was unfolding. The billionaire's polished shoes splashed through puddles as he drew closer. The storm had no mercy, raindrops battered his hair, darkening his suit, soaking the fabric clinging to his shoulders. His entourage hurried behind him, umbrellas stretched desperately to shield him, but he waved them off with a sharp gesture. The crowd that had gathered under storefronts and bus stops watched in stunned silence. For a moment, it looked surreal, a man who commanded entire boardrooms, who lived in mansions and traveled in private jets, lowering himself into the very chaos he was thought to rise above. He stopped just a few feet from the girl. The girl's hands trembled around the tin can as she lifted it slightly, unsure of what to do. She had begged countless strangers before, but none had ever looked at her the way this man did, eyes not of pity, but of deep, unsettled thought. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "Please, sir, just a little bread." The billionaire's chest tightened. Something in her voice, so faint, yet desperate, cut through the noise of the storm, the shouts of his assistants, the blaring of nearby car horns. It wasn't just a plea for food, it was survival condensed into a single fragile request. Behind him, one of his security men leaned closer, whispering urgently, "Sir, let us handle this. We'll give her some cash and get you inside." But the billionaire didn't move. His assistants exchanged nervous glances, clearly unsettled. The meeting inside the hotel was time-sensitive, investors waiting on the clock. Millions of dollars depended on his presence. And yet here he was, locked in a silent standoff with the storm, with his staff, with himself. He bent slightly, bringing himself closer to the girl's eye level. For a man of his stature, it was unthinkable. His trousers darkened with mud, his jacket heavy with rain. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl blinked, surprised. Few people had ever bothered with her name. Alma, she whispered. Alma, he repeated, as though engraving it into his memory. Why are you here, in the rain? Tears mingled with raindrops on her cheeks. My mama is sick. She can't walk to sell oranges anymore. I just need bread and medicine for her. Please. Her words cracked, each syllable trembling under the weight of her need. The billionaire swallowed hard. The crowd leaned closer, straining to catch every word. Passers-by who had ignored the girl earlier now stood frozen, shame flickering across their faces. Even the vendors nearby paused their shouting, silenced by the scene. His assistants grew restless. One muttered, "Sir, this isn't the time." But the billionaire silenced him with a glance so sharp that no one dared speak again. The rain hammered harder, thunder rumbling overhead as though the heavens themselves were watching. The billionaire straightened slightly, his decision forming, his silence heavy with purpose. He could give her money and walk away, that was expected. That was easy. But something inside him refused to settle for the easy way. The crowd waited, hearts pounding, as the billionaire prepared to make a choice that would change everything. The billionaire knelt slowly, his knees sinking into the cold, muddy pavement. Gasps rippled through the growing crowd. Never before had they seen him, or any man of his wealth and stature, lower himself in such a way. His expensive suit, custom-stitched and worth more than what some earned in a year, darkened with rain and dirt. But he didn't seem to care. His focus was entirely on the frail girl before him. Alma clutched her tin can tighter, her knuckles white. She wasn't sure if she should be afraid or relieved. Men in polished suits had never stopped for her before, much less spoken her name. She shivered violently, her lips trembling as she tried to speak, but her teeth chattered from the cold. "Tell me about your mother," the billionaire said, his voice calm yet heavy with intent. His tone wasn't the dismissive curiosity of a stranger tossing coins, it was the genuine inquiry of someone who needed to understand. Alma blinked, stunned by the question. She hesitated, then whispered, she's sick. She coughs all the time. Sometimes she can't breathe. She used to sell oranges by the road, but now, her small voice broke, and she looked down, ashamed of her tears. Now we don't have food. I just wanted to buy bread for her. The billionaire's jaw tightened, his heart pounding in a way unfamiliar to him. He had closed billion-dollar deals, commanded armies of employees, stood before world leaders, yet, somehow, this little girl's plea unsettled him more than any negotiation ever had. From the edge of the crowd, a skeptical voice called out, "It's a trick. These beggars always lie." A few others murmured in agreement, shaking their heads. But others, watching Alma's trembling hands and gaunt cheeks, knew there was no act here, just desperation. The billionaire glanced around briefly, his piercing eyes silencing the whispers. Then, in an action no one expected, he slipped out of his tailored coat and carefully draped it over Alma's shoulders. The coat hung loosely, far too big for her small frame, but instantly shielded her from the cold rain. The crowd gasped louder this time. Some reached instinctively for their phones, capturing the moment. Cameras flashed. Videos streamed live. Alma looked down at the heavy fabric now warming her. Her lips parted, speechless. Never in her life had anyone offered her more than a passing glance, and now a man she had only ever seen on billboards had given her something that wasn't just clothing, it was dignity. "Do you have brothers or sisters?" the billionaire asked softly, his voice almost drowned by the storm. "No, just mama," she whispered. The billionaire nodded slowly. For a long moment, he said nothing. Raindrops slid down his face as he studied her, as though weighing something far greater than the situation before him. Behind him, his security team shuffled anxiously, still unsure how to react. The assistants tried once more, "Sir, please, the investors are waiting." But their voices no longer mattered. The billionaire was not the same man who had stepped out of that car minutes ago. Something had shifted. And the crowd could feel it, something monumental was about to happen. The billionaire strode toward his convoy, Amma clinging tightly to him, her tiny frame trembling in his arms. The crowd parted instinctively, their whispers rising into a storm of their own. Some applauded wildly, overcome by the sight, others folded their arms, skeptical, muttering suspicions that this must be some elaborate stunt. Phones were everywhere, raised high, flashing, recording. Within minutes, live streams were flooding social media. A billionaire just picked up a homeless girl in the rain, captions blazed across screens. Comments poured in, disbelief battling awe. At the edge of the crowd, an elderly man